Imagine having a supercharged marketing team at your fingertips. Imagine not having to hire or fire any more employees because you found the perfect ones. Imagine a world where AI assistants help streamline your content production. How would that sound? Join us today for Strategy Talks. We're going to talk about AI assistants. Let's find out how to harm AI's power to revolutionize your content strategy. This is Strategy Talks. If you're ready, so am I. I'll be right back.
Let's strategize together. Let's hear it from an expert. Join the conversation, it's informative and free. You and me, let's talk some strategy. Now here's your host, Morin-van.
Hi, everybody. My name is Doreen Morin-van. Yes, I am here, and we are live with Strategy Talks, another episode. Today, we're talking AI assistants, and I am so excited that my friend Mike is here. Before I bring him onto the stage, I want to welcome everybody who's here with us live. If you're live, wave at us. Let us know where you're joining us, whether you're on Facebook or LinkedIn, on YouTube. And I want to wish a special welcome to those of you who listen to Strategy Talks as a podcast. We appreciate you very, very much. So I'm going to bring onto the stage with me Mike Allton. How are you today?
I am fantastic. Thank you, friend, for having me. It's great to see you and be here with you. I'm excited for this conversation.
I know. So AI assistants, before we dive into what they can do, Mike, do you have a definition for us what they are?
Oh, I would say an AI assistant is a customized and personalized version of the AI. So it's not just starting up a chat in ChatGPT or Gemini. You've taken some time to think about what you want this assistant to do, just like somebody you would hire. And you've trained that assistant in that role. That means you have to have defined that role. And I know this is probably a meandering definition. It's not concise, but I want to make sure everybody understands, you've taken the time to think about what you want the AI to do, and you've trained it to do it so that it can do it more than once. I think that's an also key part that we want to factor into this definition. Again, it's not just a chat that you're going back to over and over again. I really don't think of that as an AI assistant. It might be able to do some of the same things, but I think taking the time to train it in a way that is repeatable. I can go back tomorrow, next week, next month to that assistant, start a new chat, and get it to help me do the things I want it to do. That's an AI assistant to me.
All right. So now that we know what that is, how do you see and what's already happening in the world of marketing, but also business, where people are deploying these AI assistants? What are the changes that are you either seeing or that are coming? And of course, we want to know, why would somebody want to use an AI assistant over hiring somebody to do the task?
Yeah, that's why I love this question, because we should talk about the why before we get into the how and that sort of thing, which, to those of you listening and watching, we will get into the how. I'll absolutely share how to create some AI assistants and what you might do with them. But the why is important. The why isn't to replace employees. The why is to make sure that the employees that we have, whether you're a solopreneur or a 10,000 person enterprise, let's make sure the people that we have, including ourselves, are as productive as possible, are as focused as possible on the things that matter the most. Now, if you step back for a second and think about the things that you or your employees do every single day, you got a 40, maybe 50, 60-hour work week ahead of you, and you're spending time replying to emails, you're spending time filling in reports, you're spending time answering questions. A lot of the stuff that we do is repetitive, and a lot of the stuff that we do is not actually driving real business results. I mean, if you do a quarterly retrospective, if you're using like the EOS framework and you've got big rocks or OKRs and you're identifying the most important things, replying to emails isn't on that list. It's just not. That's something we all have to do, but it's not amongst our most important business tasks. So those kinds of repetitive things, those are the areas where we can bring in artificial intelligence to automate some of the things, augment some of the things, maybe even replace some of the things. You know, I do a bunch of podcasts at Agorapulse, and I'm sure we'll probably talk about this in more depth, but I have an AI assistant that helps me prepare for every one of my episodes. Something that used to take me 2 hours now takes just 15 minutes thanks to AI. And it's actually elevated the quality, frankly, of the work that I'm doing, but it frees me up to do the things that matter the most to me in my role at Agorapulse, which is to actually talk to people. AI can't really do that. I have to say yet. Who knows what'll happen in 2 years?
What if you clone yourself, right? Clone yourself, Mike.
I know, right? Maybe AI will be able to do that. But for now, we want to make sure that ourselves and the people that are in our business can think strategically long-term, can focus on human connections and relationship building, can spend more time with our most important clients and customers. That's what we want to free ourselves up to do. So that's the why behind having AI assistants.
I love that. So, you know, for those of you listening, the way I look at it, very similar to Mike, is that, you know, there's certain tasks that you need certain parts of your brain for, right? Like all the reports, the analytics, you know, if you were to get into the weeds of some of that stuff, it takes a lot of time, right? Or you hire somebody, but what if those reports come to you automatically? And then not only that, your AI system feeds you that data. That leaves a lot more room, like Mike said, for creativity, for talking to humans and overseeing and overthinking that strategy that you have. So I love that. You and I are very much aligned with that. And we're definitely going to get into how to create something like that. Can you walk us through an example where an AI assistant improved your marketing? Now, you just kind of said, you kind of used the example of your podcast, but could you give us like, what would take you 2 hours and how does it now take 50? I'm curious. I know I have my own assistants and I agree with you. The outcome is actually better. This season 4, if you just started listening to it or watching it, I'm telling you, season 4 is the best yet, because I started using AI for the questions that I'm asking and for preparing myself and doing deep dives into who I'm talking to, knowing what they know. So definitely, and it's a lot shorter time frame, but how are you using that and what is the differentiator there?
Yeah, so it's very similar. So to start 2024, I had a weekly show, a podcast, live webinar, all the things at Agorapulse called the Martech Show. And every single week, we were interviewing a different guest. Excuse me. We were interviewing a different guest, a marketing technology provider. And I was spending 2 hours researching the guest, coming up with how I wanted to frame the conversation, coming up with a custom bio for them that I would read and get them all hyped up, coming up with expected takeaways, and of course the questions that we would go and ask them, my partner Robin Diamond and I, when we were hosting these shows. I would spend 2 hours doing that. And they would give me all their information, but I'd still go to LinkedIn and I'd review their profile and do all the things. Then I came across a solution from a guy named Dan Sanchez, who's now working with Social Media Examiner. And Dan had created a custom GPT called a Showrunner. And as soon as I learned about it, I was like, oh, this is brilliant. I figured out how it worked. I figured out how I needed to customize it to actually fit my run of show and my process for podcasting, and then also my voice and my style. This is all stuff that you want to bake into your AI assistants. And it basically now steps me through the process. It asks me, what's the name of the guest? And I give it. And it says, okay, cool. What is their LinkedIn profile? And I pop that into the chat. And then it says, okay, what do you want to talk about with this guest? And typically I have a Google form that collects that information. So I ask them up front, what do you want to talk about on the show? And I pop that into the chat and it says, fantastic. Based on their LinkedIn and their background and what they want to talk to, here's 5 possible topics for the show. And I pick one. I go back and forth if I don't like the choices, but generally they're pretty good. So I pick one of those and it says, cool, based on that topic, here's 10 title ideas for the show. And I pick one. Or I can go back and forth if I want to. And it says, fantastic. Here is 10 questions for the show, which are always phenomenal. My guests compliment me on the questions. And here are 3 expected takeaways. Here's how we're going to frame the show, a little intro. And then here's a hyped up bio for the guest that I read. And the cool thing is, Doreen, I start every show then reading this introduction and the hyped up bio. And then I say, hey, Doreen, welcome to the show. And half of the guests will stop at that point and say, Mike, I need to bring you everywhere I go when I'm talking on stages, or just to have you introduce me because that was fantastic. And I tell them, hey, I appreciate that. Claude wrote that. You're the one who did all the work, but Claude wrote that intro. And that's all because I took the time to train it up front, what my process was, what I wanted to get out of it at the end. And so then, like I said, it's now just like 10 minutes of me going back and forth and having the AI create this content. And then I copy and paste it into a Google Doc that I then share with the guests. So that reduced that time from 2 hours on average that I was spending with the Martech show down to 15 minutes. So that saved me time. But then it also allowed me to tackle bigger projects.
Right.
So instead of just doing the weekly Martech show, I now have 4 new podcasts, each one targeting a different ICP at Agorapulse. I could not have done that a year ago with that other process, because 2 hours per show, plus finding guests, plus actually recording, plus processing the show, no way could I have done that before.
That's amazing. I love that example. And I want to get that GPT. I have my own assistant, but I think I might need to make a couple of different changes to it. But I basically have a similar process. One of the questions that I enter in that process is, what are some questions that if they've been on shows before, what are some questions that they've been asked before or what are some questions that nobody has asked them? So kind of put that into to really give them a personalization on my show, right? So I'm trying to get something out of you, Mike, that you might not have shared anywhere else. That's my goal. And I love that similar assistant that we have that gets that information to you so fast. So who is using AI assistants right now? We're in marketing. We're in the forefront. We know everybody's listening knows what AI is, artificial intelligence, right? We know that, and a lot of people believe that AI is a tool. Like, I'm using Agorapulse to schedule my social media posts, right? Agorapulse is a tool to me, but AI is more than a tool. Who has discovered that? Outside of marketing, who's using AI assistants right now? Who is at the forefront of this?
There's nuance to that. So you're right. Marketing is a very tech-heavy and tech-savvy industry. So marketers tend to be at the fore today of technology adoption. We're used to change. As much as we complain about social networks changing every single day, AI come along and said, hey, hold my beer. I'm going to change every hour. And we're used to that. So we're comfortable with that. We're comfortable learning new things. Other industries, other departments within businesses, they're definitely lagging behind marketing from as far as I can tell, but they are slowly catching up. Now, obviously, this is going to be different. Not every sales team, not every HR team is using AI, but they all can, right? BDRs, AEs in the sales team, they can all have AI assistants that are helping them research prospects, drafting personalized communication and follow-up, helping them prepare for those pitch and client meetings and those prospect meetings, so that they go into the meeting understanding what your actual pain points are and what you're actually doing today in your business from whatever it is that I'm selling. And then they also can use systems that they can access real time during the call. Like, let's suppose, for instance, this was a sales meeting and you asked me, okay, Mike, you've got a cool solution, but I don't know, is there anybody else in my industry actually using this tool? And if I'm a savvy AE, I've got my AI assistant up and I'm typing in there, or maybe even having it listen, because some of the systems and tools can actually do this real time today. But I'm saying, hey, I need all of our case studies from the healthcare industry pronto. And the AI systems today can give you that. They can feed you that information within seconds. Yeah, absolutely, Mike. Here are 3 success stories of hospitality or healthcare or whatever industry you're talking about. If you've created that content, that's the key. The content's got to be there. But if you've created that content, it can be served up quite quickly. Customer success teams are using AI systems today. They're using AI assistants to help them kind of handle a lot of that routine stuff that I talked about before. I remember, gosh, in a previous life, I was customer support in a global IT company, a company called Dana Corporation, and I was in the ERP platform or department. So I was supporting major ERP systems like Bond and Oracle and SAP and Lawson, because we had 80,000 employees around the world, and they were all using different systems. But they all needed password resets like every other day. Every other day.
Of course I do.
And they all needed other kinds of questions answered over and over and over again. And if I'd had AI back then, I could have automated so much of the work I was doing because it was repetitive. And then, of course, for the stuff that's not repetitive, wow, suddenly I have an AI assistant that I can turn to and ask those kinds of questions. In my role at Agorapulse, I'm the chief storyteller. And I've been in that role for less than a year now. I've been interviewing folks for a long time, but the role of chief storyteller we kind of invented and created last year for me, mostly because we needed somebody who would take charge of our story, who would take charge of our customer stories, of our brand story, our employee stories. We didn't have anybody who was responsible for that. And we didn't have anybody who had said, this is how we tell stories. And while I've been familiar with storytelling, I'm familiar with the hero's journey, Joseph Conrad, and so on, I certainly have not read every storytelling framework that exists, because for people who don't know, there are a lot. There's all kinds. There's Tamsin Webster's, A Red Thread.
I've read that book.
Park
Howell. Yeah.
Fantastic, approaches to storytelling. Mimi Rodriguez. They all have great approaches. They all share other people's approaches. And so I had a conversation with my AI assistant because I didn't know which I should choose for telling Agorapulse's brand story. And I didn't know which I should choose to telling our customers' stories. And so we had a strategic conversation back and forth. I said, look, I'm familiar with Tamsin Webster. I'm familiar with Park Howell. Is there one that's better? What do those frameworks really look like? Boil them down for me. Make them really succinct for me. Remind me what those look like. Should we adopt them? What should we do? We ended up coming up with kind of a amalgamation of Tamsin and Park's approach. And that's how I made sure then that I had a framework for telling every single customer story going forward. So then they all now follow the same framework. And what's really cool then is I was able to train a different AI assistant so that if I were to interview you as a customer of Agorapulse, we would just do a recording. I've got 15 questions I'm going to ask you, and we may jump around a little bit, but that's basically what I'm going to do. And I'm going to feed that into the script, get the transcript, share it with my AI assistant who knows our brand voice and the framework that I want to follow. And it takes everything that you would say in a 45-minute interview and presents it in a perfect success story that is Agorapulse's voice and the framework that I decided I wanted us to follow. And I hand that to content. And at first they wanted to spend hours toiling over it and rephrasing it and just kind of, polishing it, whatever. After they did that a couple times, they realized, you know what, Mike, we don't really need to do that. These are really good as is. So they still look at them. They still do a review. But the success stories that we're publishing today are basically what Claude has written using my AI assistant as a kind of underlying guideline and framework. And I also, with a different AI assistant, created a scoring system for these success stories to help us understand, are they really good? And we decided what was important to us in terms of criteria. And as I run these new stories through the scoring system, they score 25% higher than the stories we used to publish before I took over and we started using this system.
Wow, this is so insightful. This is brilliant. So if you're listening, if you're watching and you're like, I need me some of these assistants, let's get into the nitty gritty, because this is definitely the essence of what AI can do and the future of AI. And I know I work with agency owners. I know with business owners, and they might just dipping their toe into like a Chat GPT or a, Gemini, and they ask them one sentence questions, and then they take what comes at them as the gospel, right? Just to say it. And so listening to you, refining it and getting the stories, if you're watching and listening, you're going to want this, right? You're going to want an AI assistant or 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 to do all these different tasks, right? So Mike, how do we get started? What do we need? Is it expensive? How long does it take? I'm going to let you. We've got 10 minutes. Let's go
All right.
do this. I'm going to let you talk. And then, of course, people have follow-up questions. They can come back to you. But just how does somebody get started?
Well, the good news is it doesn't cost anything extra. If you're paying for ChatGPT, if you're paying for Gemini, if you're paying for Claude, you can do this. I tend to use a tool called Magi most of the time, which is a wrapper for all the different language models, and it has the same capability built in. Now, for each one of these major large language models, the tools, ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, they have the ability to create what's called custom instructions. So in ChatGPT, that's a custom GPT. In Gemini, it's a gem. In Claude, it's a project. In Magi, if you want to skip all that, it's called a persona. And in those instances, what you're doing is you're adding some additional context and information and instructions, maybe even step-by-step stuff, to the AI that it will have at its fingertips before you even start the chat. So when I start a new chat with my Social Pulse Podcast Agency Edition showrunner assistant, AI assistant, it already knows everything that I wanted to know about the podcast, and it already knows the step-by-step instructions. So I don't have to continue the same chat, which is a little bit dangerous because at a certain point, if you keep doing the same chat for too long, the AI will forget the stuff at the beginning of the chat. And it won't tell you that. You won't know. It'll just start to give you nonsense answers because it's forgotten the stuff that you talked about.
I was going to say, I've been in that
ago.
before. I've been in that before. I'm like, remember, you need to use these keywords. And so I love that you're explaining this because that definitely happened when I first started using some of these tools where I'm like, why is it not remembering? I gave it keywords, right? But putting that ahead of time in those areas, that's good. Okay, so you have that, and then you have the conversations.
Right. So you start a new chat with your AI assistant every time you want to, have it do something new for you. You can still go back to those old chats, particularly if you're doing a strategic project or something like that. Maybe you're having a long conversation that's spanning hours, days, weeks even, which is very cool. But for the day-to-day stuff, you don't want to do that. Just start a new chat and you fire up, you select the GPT or the gem or the project or the persona that you want to use in that chat. So for example, an easy one that all marketers should have is some kind of voice assistant. When you just want to create a piece of content and it's not something you normally work on. Maybe you don't normally do emails, but tomorrow you decided, you know what, it's been 3 months since I emailed my list. I probably should send them an email. And you want to work with an AI assistant that knows your brand voice or your personal voice, whatever that is. So hopefully you've already got that documented somewhere and you would just copy and paste that into the custom instructions. When we're creating content, this is what we want the content to sound like. We're witty, we are thoughtful, we're conversational, we're not stuck up, we're very, personal with just a little bit of professional, so it's casual. We don't use words like delve or in the vast landscape, kind of a scene hook. You can tell it all that in advance, and then it remember that. I mean, for people who've been using ChatGPT for a while, and they've been struggling to get it to sound like them, and it was just a 4-paragraph email, but they spent 4 hours going back and forth and fighting with ChatGPT because it still sounded robotic. It was still inserting emojis after every single sentence. When you set up a custom instruction, you can tell it, don't use emojis. Don't use delve.
Right.
Like ever, right? Don't start the whole thing with in the vast marketing landscape because for some reason AI loves to use these what we call scene setting hooks and they're just trite. Don't use them. So that's what you can do. And you can start with something as simple as a voice custom instruction, or I love using an audience custom instruction. So if you've got some personas or at least one persona identified, you know who your target audience is, set that up as a custom instruction. Now I'll say, if you've never done any of these things, the best part about AI is that you can ask it to help you create these things. If you haven't defined your brand voice and style, fire up a new conversation, say, hey, ChatGPT, hey, Gemini, I don't have a voice guide. How can we create a voice guide together? Ask me questions and let's build a voice guide. And AI is remarkably good at asking you questions. If you tell it to do that, it's one of the little tricks that people need to learn when they're communicating with AI. If you just ask it to do something for you, it's trained to be as helpful as it can, and it's just going to do it. Even if it doesn't know how to do it, if it doesn't know how to do a good job, it's going to try, and it's going to come out as rubbish. But if you say, this is what I want to accomplish, ask me questions so that we can get there together. And it will give you an honest to God questionnaire. It will give you 10, 15 questions, and it might be so thought provoking that you might have to go away and come back, but it will do that for you, right? If it's a voice guide, it's going to ask you for samples of your writing, and you're going to have to think through, okay, gosh, what have I written that I really liked, that I felt like really sounded like me? Now, I was fortunate. I've written 1,000 blog posts, like literally. It wasn't hard for me to go find samples of my favorite pieces and arm it with that information. And so we created a voice guide together that was witty and yet casual and professional and, sage-like. That's kind of the way that I do things. I take complex technical topics and I change them into ways that people can understand them easily. And I talk the same way that I write, so it's fairly easy for me. That's what I would start and create a couple of things like those. Now, with each of the major LLMs, the technical details of how to do it will vary just a little bit. They're all pretty much the same. It's like if you're in Gemini, in the left-hand corner, the bottom left-hand corner, there's a little icon that says Gem Manager. You click on that, and they'll have some pre-built gems that you can create, or you create your own. You're going to give it a title. You're going to give it a description if you want to, and then you're going to type in or paste in the custom instructions. And again, remember, if you're doing this for the first time, you can have AI help you, and you can say to Gemini, I want a gem to help me craft weekly email newsletters, ask me questions to help me do this. And at the end of the process, it can actually output for you the entire set of custom instructions that you'll just copy and paste into the gem. With ChatGPT, it's a very simple process. You need to go to the web store or the online version. Don't use the app for this. But go to chatgpt.com, and in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see GPT Store, I think is what it still says. The words may vary, as they progress, but you're going to look for the GPT Store, and that's where you can create your own custom GPTs. With Magi, again, that wrapper that I use, and I love Magi because I can use any LLM I want paired with any assistant that I want. So I have an AI chief of staff. My AI chief of staff knows everything about me personally and everything about me professionally that I wanted it to know. It understands my side hustles, the social media hat and the AI hat. It knows I've got a podcast. It knows my goal for the year. It knows my challenges and restrictions. It knows all my platforms and channels that I can participate in. So I can fire up a new chat with my AI chief of staff at any time of day about anything I want. It comes into the conversation already knowing who I am and what I'm talking about. I don't have to feed it a lot of context and background information. And I can even share with you guys how you can build your own AI chief of staff or AI work buddy if you want. But when you do that, I love how in Magi, I can start a conversation with maybe my AI chief of staff. And if it's strategic, like, hey, I want to do a marketing campaign next month, I might have that conversation with Gemini, because I kind of like how Gemini thinks strategically. And we'll get through it and we'll identify all the different parts of that marketing campaign, what I'm trying to accomplish, who I'm talking to, what the goals and the assets are. But then when it comes to actually creating the assets, like maybe the core pillar of that marketing campaign is an article or an email or something like that. That's what I want to turn to Claude, because I think personally, Claude seems to be a better writer and a creative assistant. Now, all the different language models are going up and down and they're competing with each other and they're improving. So if you're already using ChatGPT or you're already using Gemini, particularly if you're in a Google Workspace environment, or like me, I didn't realize I could have had Google's Gemini plan for free a year ago. I was already paying Google $20 a month for added space. And then when I looked, I realized I could just switch to the Google One plan, which comes with the space that I was paying for. and also has their AI assistant. Okay. My point is, if you're already sold into one of them, don't worry about this.
Right. Right.
But if you're not, I would definitely consider Magi, because you can switch back and forth within the exact same chat. You can switch the LLMs, you can switch the personas of the assistants. So you can go back and forth and have a really productive conversation, like you were having a team meeting with all of your assistants at once.
Right. Well, so believe it or not, we're right at 30 minutes, which is crazy. But you said something earlier that I want to go back to real briefly, and then we're going to close out this chat because I promised 30 minutes. You said I use it to, your chief, what was it? Your chief,
The AI chief of staff. Yeah.
Yes, chief of staff. You use it to talk to him and have this high level conversation, this strategic thinking meeting. And that is something that I have found to be one of the most important ways that I use AI, is that especially when you're a freelancer or you work alone, you're a solopreneur, you don't have a team to bounce ideas off of. AI can become that second person in the room. And you say, I have this idea. What do you think? You know me. And I think that thinking it through, and like you said, talking it through with AI, like, I have this idea. What do you think? How about this or this marketing thing? If you're feeling left out or lonely or you're stuck, using AI to get beyond that is going to be your best bet, without having to go out and meet people or join a mastermind, or which I know you're in a mastermind. I'm in a mastermind. It's incredible. But if you don't have that mastermind, use the AI for that level of strategic planning and strategic thinking and, just bantering back and forth. I think that is such a great use. I have 20 more questions, but we're out of time. So, Mike, I know there's people watching, listening that are going, oh my God, I need to do this. I've heard about this before. I just haven't done it. Where can they meet you? Where can they listen to your podcast? And which one should they listen to if they want to learn more about how to do these things?
It is important. The Harvard Business Review just released a study where they worked with over 700 Procter & Gamble employees. They gave them an AI assistant, they trained them how to use it, and they watched their productivity literally double. One individual is now doing the work of 2 humans, one individual plus an AI assistant. So I actually had tried to, I wanted to share with folks a prompt on how they could create their own AI work buddy. Because like you said, I work alone. I do work for Agorapulse, but I work remotely. I'm not part of a team in Agorapulse. And of course, I'm a solopreneur with the AI hat. So I don't have anybody sitting here to talk to about anything. And I thought, I probably should talk to the AI. And I have my AI chief of staff, which I just developed over time. And I thought I could share a prompt to help people develop their own.
Absolutely.
And so I was working with my AI chief of staff. I call him Clue. And so I was working with Clue to develop a prompt, and it got so lengthy. I kind of had the abandoned idea of sharing a prompt. What I did was I created an instruction document. It's a multi-page PDF file. And the prompt now is just a paragraph that basically says, hey, you're going to help me create an AI work buddy, which is an AI assistant. Use the attached instructions to ask me questions. And so folks can copy and paste that prompt and attach the file, which has everything that you want the AI to know about you, who you are, what you do, where you work, your website, your LinkedIn, all that stuff. So I've got that at the aihat.com/AI work buddy. All one word. People can grab it for free. If you just want to connect with me, go to the aihat.com/connect. That's where you'll find all my social profiles. I'm on all of them. So whichever one you prefer, you can connect with me there, and you can find my podcast, the AI Hat Podcast, there.
Wonderful. Mike, thank you so much for being here today. You gave a lot of great information, and I know that we're on the cusp of this, especially as marketers. We know we need to learn this stuff because that's the future, right? But we want to make sure that we do it right. We protect our clients, copyright, our clients' information. There's a whole nother podcast, I'm sure, on that. But start with yourself. Start with, this is a great understanding. If you're a business owner or you're a marketer and you want to start getting beyond just using AI as a tool to ask a question to, like we used to use Google, start with creating these AI assistants for yourself to create these personas to help you be more productive. I love this. Mike, thank you so much for being with us today. And thank you to those of you who stayed all the way to the end, whether you're watching this live on Strategy Talks or listening to it as a podcast. I'll be back next week with another episode. Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.